Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm just gonna go ahead and do my May wrap up today and let you guys in on the books I read in May, what I thought of them, and give a little bit of a review. May was not a huge reading month for me. The weather was starting to get nice here in Maine, and some of the quarantine things have started to get lifted, and so I haven't been reading quite as much as I did back when the quarantines were stricter and the weather wasn't as nice. But I did get through some books, and a lot of them were also like 400 or more pages long, which is just a lot. So I got through 6 books this month. Again, not a lot, but they're all really long, except for one. Alright, so the first book I read in May was The 2 Lives of Lydia Byrd. I was really anticipating this one, and it didn't disappoint. This is about a girl whose fiance passes away in a car accident on her birthday, and it kind of follows the next 18 months or so of her life as she kind of tries to move on. They're like middle school sweethearts, and so like she really doesn't know what life looks like without him, and it's just a lot of really kind of growing up on her own, just because again, that person that's been in her life since middle school is no longer there, and trying to figure out how life looks moving forward. Her relationships with her mother and her sister and brother-in-law and her fiance's friends, all of that, what's going on with work. She's just trying to kind of figure out how to live with the grief and cope and learn what things in her life need to change in order for her to do that. I think it's in the synopsis, so I'm pretty sure this isn't a spoiler, but she goes on sleeping pills because she can't sleep at night, and she is actually kind of living this whole other life in her dreams with her fiance, and that's why it's called The 2 Lives of Lydia Byrd, because she kind of has this whole dream life going on at the same time that's running parallel to her life in reality with her fiance gone. I gave this 4 stars on Goodreads. I really enjoyed it. The ending was kind of predictable. I thought it could have actually used some better lead up, but all in all, pretty decent book. I enjoyed it. This would actually make a pretty good beach read if you're able to go to the beach this summer. The next book that I read in May was The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abby Dare, and this is so hard to read. It is so heavy. It's about a girl named Aduni. I had to check that because I read this way at the beginning of last month, Aduni, and she is a Nigerian girl who is essentially sold into child marriage at the age of like 13 or 14, and she really wants to be in school. She wants to continue to be able to get her education, and it's hard to read because there's starvation, there's abuse, there's you name it, and she is determined to press on to get her education and better her life, and it's incredibly moving. It is such a good book. It's really well written, and I loved it, but it's definitely heavy. I gave this 5 stars on Goodreads, I believe, and definitely recommend checking this out. The next book I read in May was my very first Stephen King novel. I went ahead and started with Misery. So this is one of his thrillers. It's not the horror stuff. I believe this is one that was originally published under his pseudonym when he was trying to publish more than one book a year in the 80s. I could be wrong about that. But I think this was one of them. And Misery follows a writer who is in a car accident and injured, and this woman who's basically insane, but she's a retired nurse, pulls him out of the car and kind of in a makeshift way is sort of nursing him back to health, but she's also crazy. So a lot of stuff happens and he's trying to escape, and he ends up having to write a whole book because this woman is a fan of his, and it's all linked to him trying to escape. And I don't want to say any more than that because it would definitely spoil it, but I really enjoyed this. It's not a fast read, but it's definitely gripping, and I really enjoyed it, and so I definitely want to start reading some more Stephen King. I really should be doing that anyway. I'm a Mainer. The next book that I read in May was The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton, and I did not rate this one on Goodreads. Oh, by the way, I gave Misery either 4 or 5 stars. I did not rate The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Why? My relationship with this book is super love-hate. I don't know what to say. I honestly don't. It is really masterful, and I don't know that the author could have done what he did without having the book be this long, but it's almost 500 pages long, and there's a twist in like every single chapter, and after a while having that many twists, the twists get boring. I was like 100 pages from the end and I wanted to give up. I just couldn't take it anymore, but I kept on pushing through, and the end was good enough that I was glad I pushed through, and that kind of wrapped everything up and made it so I didn't feel like it was a huge waste of time. But 500 pages and so many twists, and I just don't know what to say about it. I have such mixed feelings. I don't know whether to give it 5 stars or 1 star. It's all over the place. I don't know what to say about it. I really, really don't. I don't want to not recommend this because, like I said, it was good. If you're gonna go into it committed to finishing the whole thing, because I didn't feel like it was worth it until the very end. So if you're gonna do it, commit. That's all I have to say. The next book I read in May also didn't end up getting a star rating from me because I also don't know what to say about it. That was All the Ugly and Wonderful Things by Bryn Greenwood. This is the story of a girl who is raised by drug addict and dealing parents, and she pretty much is the adult of the family. And she gets involved with an older man, and it's not such a huge age gap that it would be a problem if she was an adult, but she's not an adult. And I just don't know. I just don't know what to say. It's also set in the 70s and 80s, so again, her upbringing and her maturity level is going to have some bearing on the context, and the time period is going to have some bearing on the context. But I don't know how to feel about this as a book because it had me rooting for them as a couple, even though I felt like it was wrong to be doing that. And I kind of have a problem with that. I don't know what to say about it. It is interesting. It's an engaging read. It's definitely heavy. And I would just say, don't be surprised by the content that's in here. It's also a lot more explicit than things that I would normally want to be reading. So, you know, heads up on that as well. Lots of kind of more explicit content in this one. So I didn't rate it because I feel like it's well written and I feel like it was an interesting read, but I just have a real problem with how the romance is portrayed, and I just don't think it's right. The last book that I read in May is called Love Without Borders. It is about a woman who, along with her husband, has adopted kids from across the world and has even adopted embryos, and she has a couple of biological children as well. And it's just this awesome story about growing their family. I think they're at like 8 kids now, and how all of that was brought together and the craziness of their lives and how everything worked out. I'm not the kind of person who can ever see like having that many kids hanging around, but it was kind of really cool to read from this woman's perspective, and just see how she felt moved in her heart to adopt all these kids and to adopt embryos and pretty much have someone else's babies. It's just a really cool story about her life and being a mom, and I read that because I was really interested in her story, because I have a younger sister who is adopted and my parents are currently foster parents, and then I gave it to my mom for Mother's Day. So I ended up giving that book 5 stars just because on a personal level, really enjoyed that one. It was only about 208 pages long, so I read it in a day. It was great, and definitely would recommend that if that sounds like the kind of story that you'd be into.